NASCAR has a safety meeting with the drivers, and the drivers react to those safety meetings, and NASCAR and the teams are having issues when it comes to the next TV deal. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsport stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off Andy Petree, as Andy Petree was presented the 2022 Smokey Yunick Award on Saturday. Andy Petree's been in the industry for many years. He's been a crew chief. He's been working with Richard Childress Racing for many years. He still continues to work at Richard Childress Racing and also has been in TV as well as a commentator. Andy Petree, in my opinion, is a NASCAR Hall of Famer and deserves to be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame, and it's really cool to see that he has been presented the Smokey Yunick Award. I think it's really awesome, really cool, and congratulations to him on winning the Smokey Yunick Award. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about helmets. As Bob Poggers put out a report on Saturday after J.J. Elliott's spin, that helmets will be required to have cameras on the helmets by 2026. We all basically thought that what happened with J.J. Elliott having basically a camera on his helmet, seeing the spin that happened. I thought that was really cool to see, and you got to really see how the driver felt about that. So I think seeing helmets is really exciting and really cool, and having the cameras on there, I think it's just absolutely phenomenal. So I think it's really great to see, and I cannot wait to see that we'll see more helmets as time goes on. I think it's really exciting, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the 2022 Bathurst 1000. Now, the 2022 Bathurst 1000 happened on late Friday evening to Saturday morning, and to Sunday morning, actually, and it was definitely a very interesting race, with Shane Van Gisbergen and Garth Tander picking up the victory. Shane Van Gisbergen and Garth Tander are two of the best drivers in the history of supercars, and they're the two that got held in their final victory in supercars. So congratulations to both drivers on picking up the victory in the Bathurst 1000. Exciting for them. Shane Van Gisbergen, of course, is in conversations to race in the Cup Series. It's very likely that it could happen in 2022. So that's really exciting for sure. Congratulations to both drivers on winning the 2022 Bathurst 1000. They deserve it, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Nick Sanchez, as the 2022 ARCA Championship race happened, and we do have a couple stories discussed around that. But Nick Sanchez was able, after a decent finish, and Daniel Diabasic unfortunately having engine failure, some sort of parts malfunction on his car, he would end up winning the 2022 ARCA Championship. Huge congratulations to Nick Sanchez. In my opinion, he has been overall the best driver that has been competing full-time. I know that Sammy Smith's been probably better than Nick Sanchez when he's raced. That unfortunately, Sammy Smith did not compete in every single race, and he was too far back in points. I think Sammy finished in the top 5 in points, though, despite not running every race. He did a really solid job and won a lot of races, but he'll likely be going to the Xfinity. Nick Sanchez, I think, is in the running, though, to go to Big Machine Racing Xfinity Series program, which I think he deserves an opportunity to drive that, in my opinion. But in all seriousness, congratulations to Nick Sanchez on picking up the victory. I think he absolutely deserves it, and in my opinion, I am happy to see that he was able to go out there when he deserves it, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Chase Elliott. Now, we do have a couple stories revolving around Chase Elliott. The first one to talk about is Chase Elliott really not being happy with a cameraman. A cameraman was basically pointing at Chase Elliott and William Byron talking, and Chase Elliott first kind of responded saying, "Hey, get out of here," and then the cameraman basically backed up, and then Chase Elliott basically told the cameraman to back away. Let me be honest with a lot of people. Some people were trying to say, oh, if it was Kyle Busch and stuff. Look, I understand Chase Elliott being really frustrated at the time. I guess he maybe shouldn't have told the cameraman who was doing their job probably to go away. But at the same token, at the same time, he did actually get dumped in the race. So that's probably why he was more pissed off than anything, to be honest. I think that's why he was upset, because Chase Elliott had a really good chance to win. I think he did have one of the fastest cars. But I think he was even complaining about the lack of passing, which we'll talk about here with the car. But I understand Chase's frustration. I guess maybe don't push the camera away. I guess that's what a lot of people are frustrated with, which makes a lot of sense. I understand people being upset about that. It's very understandable. But same token, same time, maybe don't push the camera out of the way. I guess that's what people are mainly mad about, but I understand Chase Elliott's frustration. But at the same token, same time, just don't push the camera out of the way, because you're going to have people upset. And honestly, I don't really blame the people for being upset about it. Basically, push the camera out of the way, because in my opinion, I think it's rightfully justified that people are upset. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about AM Racing. As it was announced on Friday that AM Racing is going to expand to the Xfinity Series in 2023. The plan for AM Racing is a debut in the 2023 Beef. It's What's for Dinner 300. I don't know if AM Racing is going to run full-time. I think their plan is to run part-time in 2023, but the plan is also to still run full-time in the Truck Series, I think, with 2 trucks. Pretty cool to see AM Racing is expanding to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think Austin himself is going to be the driver for the team. Honestly, if I was AM Racing, I would hire a driver or, put Brett Moffitt in your car, because I think Brett Moffitt has done a very solid job when he has driven for AM Racing. So personally, if I was AM Racing, I would basically go ahead and put Brett Moffitt in this Xfinity Series car, because I think that they would have a better chance to get in. No disrespect to Austin himself. Austin's, I think, only 26 years old, so he's still young, don't get me wrong. But if I had to choose, I think I personally would put Brett Moffitt behind the wheel of this car. But that is just my opinion on that. That being said, though, it will be their decision if they want to put Austin himself in there, because, again, Austin is the owner. But I still believe that they do believe that it should be Brett Moffitt, but that is just my opinion, and I think we could see it happen. We'll definitely have to wait to see if they do decide to put him behind the wheel of that car. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as I want to discuss a little bit something about the top 10 in regular season points without the playoff system. Now, obviously, people don't like runaway championships, so this would be a runaway championship. So, Chase Elliott, who's basically starting up first anyways, he would be first in points. Ryan Blaney would be second, 111 back. Then you have Joe Logano third, 121 back. Then you have Kyle Larson in fourth, who actually is eliminated from the playoffs. He'd be 130 back. Then you have Ross Chastain fifth, 151 back. Then you have Christabel sixth, 154 back. Then Mark Truex Jr., who didn't even make the playoffs, would be seventh, 200 back. So Mark Truex Jr. has definitely been falling a little bit farther back. William Byron would be a 211 back. Kyle Busch would be 9th, 264 back. And then Denny Hamlin would be 10th, 273 back. So I do feel for Mark Truex Jr. Kyle Larson, because I think they both personally got robbed. But yet that's how the playoff format works. And that's just top 10 in points. And to me, I think it's just crazy the fact that the top 10 is so far apart. Chase Elliott would still be the champion regardless, in my opinion. I think he still deserves a championship more than anybody else, because he's been the best all year in every single category. Stage points, lap, sled, wins, you name it. He should be basically the champion. But watching how Ryan Blaney wins it, considering Ryan Blaney has not won a race this year. But Blaney's been up front most of the year, so Blaney wins the championship by winning a race. He deserves it because he's been good. That being said, though, in my personal opinion, I think Chase Elliott deserves it more than anybody else. But that is just my opinion. That's how the playoffs work. And that is the top 10 points without the playoff format. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the sign on the racetrack. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at the Charlotte Roval, you probably saw the sign on the racetrack. So, with around 6 laps to go, NASCAR threw the caution. Well, Denny Hamlin basically on Twitter said that sign that was on the racetrack had been on there really since the beginning of stage number 3 or the end of stage number 2. And NASCAR decided to wait till a few laps to go to throw the caution. This caution is what caused all the chaos and all the controversy at the end, and some of the controversy we're going to talk about. If this is true, what Denny Hamlin is saying, which I trust Denny Hamlin on this, if this is true, NASCAR just basically threw an entertainment caution in a sense, because they wanted better entertainment because the racing wasn't that good, and they wanted the chaos and everything. And to me, if they truly did throw a caution, it should not have been thrown out, but the sign being out of the racing line, I get it that it's a dash of debris. Again, it is a legitimate debris caution, but they apparently have been out there for a long time, and someone could have honestly gotten that. The fact that they didn't, though, I thought was really stupid and really, really frustrating. So in my opinion, that caused all the chaos, and man, NASCAR should definitely be investigated for the sign being on the racetrack and basically throwing the caution. But it is what it is, and we move on from it, and basically playoffs are decided pretty much at this point anyways. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Jesse Love versus Sammy Smith. Now, if you watched the ARCA race that happened on Saturday during the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, you probably saw the end of the race with the late context. So we had three-way battle for the win between Jesse Love, Sammy Smith, and Grant Enfinger for the victory in the race. Sammy Smith was faster than the two in front of him, and basically he went behind Jesse Love and basically moved him out of the way up the race track, and Sammy Smith went on to win. After the race, Jesse Love was very unhappy and very, very upset. He went up there basically during when Sammy Smith was doing his burnout, and Sammy Smith basically decided to do a burnout in front of him. After that, Jesse Love basically decided to confront him, and he basically went up to his window and basically was, I believe, trying to punch Sammy Smith. I do feel bad for Jesse Love because Jesse Love deserved to win, in my opinion, and maybe it's a little questionable if Sammy Smith won. But Sammy Smith's also been really good this year and has been up front in a lot of these races. So, yeah, I guess, in that situation, Jesse should control his temper a little bit and wait till they get out and not punch somebody who's in the car. But at the same token and same time, at least he had his helmet off, so it wasn't like Ty Gibbs. But Jesse Love's a good driver, in my opinion. It's frustrating to see Jesse get frustrated, but it is what it is. And to me, it sucks because I do like both drivers. I love Sammy Smith. I love Jesse Love. So definitely frustrating to see that that's how it kind of went down. But it is what it is. And that is kind of how ARCA is set for you. And that's kind of how ARCA sometimes goes, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Marco Andretti. Now, Marco Andretti this past weekend made his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut in the number 48 car for Big Machine Racing. Marco Andretti was up in 20th at the time, and unfortunately, he got involved in a wreck at the Charlotte Roval, caused by two drivers we're going to talk about here in just a second. And he kind of said he might have snapped his wrist, but it seems like he was fine. Basically said his thumb kind of maybe got caught by the wheel, but he said he was lucky to catch that. Now, Marco Andretti did respond to the media and was asked, are you going to come back to NASCAR? And Marco Andretti said, yeah, I definitely would love to come back to NASCAR. Honestly, Marco Andretti back in NASCAR once again, I would definitely be for that. Marco Andretti's had a career in IndyCar that really wasn't that great, but he did win the SRX Championship in 2022, and I feel like he would do better in NASCAR and SRX. He'd probably do an IndyCar at the moment. Now, how many races do I think Marco Andretti could run? I could see him being a candidate for the 48 car, but I don't think he's going to be the favorite for the 48 car. I still think Nick Sanchez is the likely candidate for the 48 car next year for Big Machine Racing at this point. But I'm very excited to see what Marco could do if he could get back by the wheel of a Cup car again, or Xfinity car for that matter. I think it'd definitely be awesome for sure, and hoping Marco Andretti does come back and race in NASCAR, because in my opinion, it would definitely be really, really exciting, really, really cool, and it'd be fun for sure to have Marco Andretti race in NASCAR once again. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to have Anthony talk about Anthony Alfredo versus Jeb Burton. Now, teammates clashed in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at the Charlotte Roval. With around 20 or 25 laps to go in this race, this is where a little bit of the chaos began. So, going into basically one of the hairpins going to come back onto the straightaway, Anthony Alfredo got into the back of Jeb Burton and spun out Jeb Burton, and Marco Andretti got collected. Jeb Burton and Anthony Alfredo basically got into a shouting match on pit road, and there was a lot of tension. Now, obviously, Anthony Alfredo is definitely at fault for the wreck. I like Anthony Alfredo, but Anthony's definitely at fault. But Jeb Burton's also been involved in a lot of wrecks. There's a lot of tension going on at Our Motorsports, and apparently there might be some shakeups being planned. I think that's why you're seeing a lot more tension than normal. But Anthony really got into the back of Jeb Burton there, in my opinion. That was Anthony Alfredo's fault. But I will say Jeb Burton should be running better, but also Anthony probably should be running better as well. So in my honest opinion, when it comes to this situation, I think that Anthony Alfredo was in the wrong for the incident, but I do like Anthony Alfredo a lot more than Jeb Burton personally, so I'm probably going to defend him just a little bit more. But at the same token, at the same time, Anthony Alfredo Jeb was a little bit more at fault than Jeb Burton in the incident, and they kind of got into a shouting match. Will we see tensions boil over next week in Vegas? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, but there could be some stuff that could happen in a Formula 1 world, not Formula 1, but in the Xfinity world where we see Our Motorsports maybe shaking up. We'll have to wait and see for sure if there is, but there's a good chance that things could be shaking up in the motorsports world. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Pierre Gasley. As it was announced on Saturday morning in Japan that Pierre Gasley will be joining Alpine in 2023 on a multi-year deal. This means he'll be moving over to Alpine for 2023 and driving for the team, and will be teammates with Esteban Ocon, and will be replacing Fernando Alonso, who is going over to Aston Martin for 2023. This is not a surprise. Pierre Gasley has been kind of planning to leave the organization, AlphaTauri Racing, to go to Alpine Racing. Now, do I think this is an upgrade or a downgrade? Honestly, I don't think this is an upgrade or really a downgrade for Pierre Gasley. Pierre Gasley, I think, will get the best out of his equipment. We've seen Alpine actually show some really good pace this year with Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso. Alonso nearly got a podium earlier in the season, and I think that Esteban Ocon, while he's only gotten the best finish, I think, of 4th so far this year, I still think he's done a really solid job with Alpine. You're going to have two teammates really working together, and I think it's going to work out very, very solid for the organization. Congrats to Pierre Gasley of going to Alpine in 2023. I think this is a really good pickup for the team, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Nick Devries. As it was announced about 20 or 30 minutes after Pierre Gasley's announcement that Nick Devries will be going to AlphaTauri Racing in 2023 and will be teammates with Yuki Tsunoda in 2023. This is a huge, huge pickup in my opinion. Nick Devries, in his Formula 1 debut, being a substitution for Alex Albon, he got points in his debut. Nick Devries, I think, honestly, will be somewhat of a threat to win races next year. I know that sounds crazy to say, considering AlphaTauri Racing has not had the overall pace this year. I think that Nick Devries actually will be a pretty big threat, in my opinion, to go out there and win races. I think Nick Devries is a very, very talented and a really, really solid driver, and I think Nick really, truly will get the best out of his equipment for 2023. I think that Nick going over there makes a ton of sense, and he obviously and honestly deserves it, in my opinion, to head over to the team in 2023. Congratulations to Nick Devries, and I think he'll be a threat to win races, which at this point, there's only 2 rides left available. I think Mick will still have a good chance to return to his team, but you do have Nico Hulkenberg in the running for that. And then the other organization of Williams, I would love to see Logan Sargent get the ride at this point. So congratulations to Nick Devries, and he deserves to be on the grid, in my honest opinion. Congratulations to him on joining AlphaTauri Racing for 2023. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the F1 crane incident. Now, if you watched the Formula 1 race, the race got started off with a crazy hitch. We got 1 lap in the race, and chaos ensued. Carlos Sainz ends up wrecking, and then Alex Albon, he basically has something break on the race car. Now, there was an incident on the racetrack that involved Pierre Gasley. Now, Pierre Gasley was really mad on the radio, and no one really knew why he was upset on the radio. We all thought he was upset at a driver. Turns out he was really mad at F1 and the FIA due to a crane being on the racetrack and a tractor being on the racetrack. Now, obviously, with how bad the visibility was when they started the race, that was on the racetrack. Now, he did get penalized. It seems like maybe he went too fast in turn 14 and turn 15, which is maybe why he got the penalty later. But some people thought he was being penalized for turn 12. And to me, if he got penalized for turn 12, that's absolutely absurd because he could have died. That is the same corner where Jules Bianchi, 8 years ago, got killed because of a crane. Has the FIA not learned that they need to be better with their safety? And the fact that the safety vehicle was on track, regardless of how fast he's going, it doesn't matter how fast you're going, whether it's 100 kph or 200 kph or ever how fast he was going, it still can kill you. Jules Bianchi got killed 8 years ago, and has the FIA not learned that we need to be taking safety very, very seriously? I just don't understand what they were doing there, and the FIA needs to take responsibility for that. And the fact that the FIA really was not taking responsibility with the crane situation, absolutely stupid. And many drivers were upset about it, and even some commentators like Jensen Button, and even Ted Kravitz was pretty upset about it, and even a couple other people. Now, some of the Sky Sports people tried to blame Pierre for that, which is stupid because Pierre Gasley should never have been a crane on the racetrack. Don't understand why there was a crane. And honestly, FIA needs to get investigated for that because absolutely stupid in my opinion, and we could have seen a death in the sport because of the stupidity from the FIA. But they're not going to take responsibility, of course, and it's not a surprise and a shock they really did not take responsibility. But in my personal opinion, they need to take responsibility for that because that could have been a much extreme circumstance, and that could have been a really, really bad situation in regards to that. But it is what it is in regards to that situation, and it was definitely really, really frustrating to watch. And FIA needs to definitely be investigated for that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the NASCAR rules. As NASCAR on Friday, after the appeal went through for William Byron, NASCAR's updated its rulebook language after William Byron's appeal to cover future situations. They basically took the and or out of the rulebook quintessentially. Now, why did they change this rule? Well, because the appeal board basically got rid of all of William Byron's points penalty and gave him the highest fine that you could end up getting. This means that if we have a certain situation, you basically cannot get the and or situation anymore. This makes a lot of sense in my opinion because we can't have this kind of situations happening long term because it can affect the outcome of championships. And honestly, I think this affected certain drivers like a certain Kyle Larson kind of got screwed because of it in my opinion. But it is what it is in a situation, and it is good to see the NASCAR is going ahead and updating their rulebook. They really need to do it, in my opinion, and it's good to see that they have gone ahead and basically gone ahead and done that, in my opinion, because personally, I think it's the right decision and right call. And personally, in my opinion, glad to see the NASCAR has gone ahead and made the decision to make that call, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chase Briscoe. As Chase Briscoe was speaking to the media after the race, basically before the weekend's races, and he says that NASCAR needs every appeal from a NASCAR playoff driver to happen before the next race and not happen 2 weeks later. I 100% agree with Chase Briscoe. I think the fact that we had to wait till the rulebook for these penalties to basically get overturned is ridiculous because he basically had to race a lot different at Talladega because of it. And he said, had he raced a little more aggressive, the penalty happened the week of, he could have basically gone ahead and, gone ahead and basically been able to go out and race a little bit more aggressive and try to get some more points because he came in to race 11 below and was still able to make it to the next round, by the way, but he still should never really have been in that position to begin with. So I understand Chase Briscoe's frustration 100%. In my opinion, they should have been able to basically take care of this penalty before it began. And the fact that they waited as long as they did to go ahead and wait, in my opinion, is ridiculous. But it is what it is. And Chase Briscoe has every right to be frustrated. And I think the drivers should be frustrated about that, in my honest opinion, because I think it's really, really frustrating. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Corey Lejoy versus Daniel Soros. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race, and many of you that watch my channel probably ended up watching it, you saw that after the race, there was a heated argument between Daniel Soros and Corey Lejoy. I found it really cute, though, that they were basically having autographs with fans. It all stemmed from an incident between Daniel Soros and Corey Lejoy. Now, Daniel Soros did not have power steering and really could not steer his car, and he unfortunately ran into Corey Lejoy. Now, Corey Lejoy was very upset on the radio with Daniel Soros, and then with around 11 or 12 laps to go, Corey Lejoy had retaliation with Daniel Soros and nearly put Soros into the wall. Now, after, there wasn't any tension between any of the drivers, but basically there. In my opinion, I think they're probably even at this point because Soros, I don't think he intentionally ran into him because Soros, like I said, did not have power steering at the time. I understand Lejoy being frustrated, though, because I don't think Lejoy knew that Soros had power steering issues. So I think he felt like, hey, I got dumped for no reason. But again, personally, I don't think that Soros, really, in my opinion, again, Soros is in a bad position regardless. He had bad power steering problems. He was pumping it and probably couldn't really turn the car very well because he was running out of the fluid of the power steering stuff, and it just really killed the car for him. He was like 20 seconds off the pace at the time, and Lejoy was way, way faster. But I do understand Lejoy's frustration, but at the same token, at the same time, Lejoy probably should have been told at the time, hey, he doesn't have power steering. That's probably why he's really just having the issues he's having. That being said, though, will we see more tension between these two? Who knows at this point, but in my opinion, I think it's just a really bad incident for both, and I think they're even, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Ryan Blaney. Now, after the Cup Series race, Ryan Blaney was being interviewed by many media members, including Noah Lewis, and Ryan Blaney was very, very frustrated with non-playoff guys racing super, super aggressive. Ryan Blaney did say that all the playoff drivers really took care of each other throughout the race, but he says the non-playoff guys really raced really aggressive, really were racing over aggressive in the race. Now, honestly, I see Ryan Blaney's frustration. Ryan Blaney and these guys are basically trying to get into the next round of playoffs, and then in the last couple laps of the race, you really just saw the over-aggressiveness in the race. But I do think the reason that these guys at the end were getting over-aggressive is because of the lack of passing with the next-gen car, and I think that's a big reason why the drivers were getting frustrated. And I can't blame Ryan Blaney and these guys that were playoff guys for really being upset about it, because again, I think that they understand that there was a ton of lack of passing on the racetrack. That being said, though, I do get their frustrations, and in my opinion, I think these drivers could have been a little bit less aggressive in that time. But at the same token, in same time, in my opinion, I think Ryan Blaney is not in the wrong for being upset about it, and definitely need to see a little bit less aggressiveness from the non-playoff guys. But they're going for a win and trying to get the best finish as well with where they're at in points, and they're for sure as well trying to get the best finish that they can get as well. So in my opinion, I understand Ryan Blaney's frustration. I get why he's upset, and in my opinion, he's got every right to be upset about it, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're going to talk about Chase Elliott. Now, Chase Elliott was also being interviewed by the media after his camera situation, and Chase Elliott was really not happy with the lack of passing. He basically said that, enjoy it, it's going to get worse. He was really not happy after the race. Now, Chase Elliott is probably really mad at the time, but Chase Elliott is not wrong. I didn't really talk about this much during my race review yesterday, but if you watched a NASCAR Cup Series race, you saw the worst roval race we've had since the roval got introduced in 2018. There was literally no passing on the racetrack at all. Once you got the race lead, you couldn't pass. Now, there were a few guys that could pass. Kyle Larson got through the field okay. Chase Briscoe got through the field a little bit. But personally, there was a lack of passing on track. And I think that's why you saw the over-aggressiveness at the end. This car needs to be fixed on the short tracks and the road courses immediately. First thing, the safety needs to be fixed, which you're working on. Second thing, get the short track and road crash product up. The intermediate track racing cannot be the only thing good, and the super speed racing, and the dirt racing for that matter, cannot just be the good racing. You've got to have good racing on short tracks and road courses as well, because it needs to be fixed, in my opinion. Chase Elliott is definitely right in that situation, and I 100% agree with Chase Elliott on the fact that the racing was not that good, in my opinion. And personally, they do need to fix the racing on the short tracks and the road courses if we're going to see better racing, because we got North Wilkesboro coming back, and I was really frustrated by the lack of passing. It was just frustrating to watch. Too much dirty air. It was really frustrating to watch. And in my opinion, I don't blame Chase. Do not blame Chase Elliott and the drivers for being upset that the racing was really not that good, and I don't think it was that great, in my opinion. But that is my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think the racing was really entirely that good, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Daniel Hamrick. As it was announced about 2 or 3 hours before the Cup Series race that Daniel Hamrick will officially be returning to College racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2023 and will return to the 11 car. Now, Daniel Hamrick was very likely to return to College racing in 2023, but there had not been confirmation if he was going to return to College racing or not. They were close to announcing he would be returning, but they had not announced him. This is a good decision, in my opinion. I do know that Daniel Hamrick this year has not been as good, and he did get eliminated in the round of 12. But I do think College Racing, the Xfinity Series program, personally, I think that their program has not been as good this year as it has been in previous years. So it's very understandable that the racing, that they really weren't as good. I think they've been a little more focused on their Cup Series program. But I think with them having 1 year in Cup, I think they can go back and focus on their Xfinity Series program. Now, honestly, let's take a look at the lineup for College and the confirmed lineup. So for Cup, you're going to have Justin Haley and AJ Allmendinger, Dinger in the 16, and then you'll have Justin Haley in the 31 car. For the Xfinity Series, you're going to have Lanny Castle in the 10 car because he's coming back to College racing in 2023. You'll have Daniel Hamrick in the 11, and then you have Chandler Smith in the 16. This is a really strong lineup, in my opinion, and I expect College racing to be a much stronger team heading into 2023. So, though, really excited to see that Daniel Hamrick's coming back. I think Hamrick actually will be a better driver in 2023. I think the goal for the last 4 races of the year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, the goal is to try to do the best he can to improve and put on the best performance he can. So, I'm really glad to see Hamrick coming back. He deserves this, in my opinion, and great to see that Dan Hamrick is going to be back with College racing heading into 2023. He definitely deserves this, in my opinion, and in my opinion, congratulations to him on returning to the team heading into 2023. He absolutely deserves this ride, in my honest opinion. Congratulations to Daniel Hamrick on returning to College racing in 2023. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch in the potential Indy 500 run. Now, John Menard, who basically is a sponsor of Menards, who owns Menards, he basically spoke with Team Penske about an Indy 500 ride, and basically Team Penske declined. Now, apparently, when it comes to the colors of the car, they want Menards colors on the car. And McLaren wants papaya orange colors, which John Menard is not going to accept. And Team Penske is not planning to run a fourth car. So if you're paying attention to the situation, that means that Kyle Busch is out of the running for a Team Penske ride and out of the running for a McLaren ride for 2023. So where could Kyle Busch race in 2023 if he's going to race the Indy 500? Well, I think he's only got two options. Dry Ryan Bowl Racing is one organization he could run for in 2023. I think that would be a very solid team to go to. They've been contenders for top 10s in the Indy 500 in the past. And Kyle Busch would easily be able to go out there and get them a better run than a couple other drivers. And we've seen drivers like Kurt Busch come in and race and do really good in their debuts. I think Kyle would do really, really well. The other organization I think that's a potential is Ed Carpenter Racing. Ed Carpenter Racing's been obviously really fast in Indy 500 in the past, and they've got good reliability as well, and they're always fast in pole racing as well. Why would Kyle Busch not think about Ed Carpenter Racing? I think Ed Carpenter Racing would absolutely be a very viable option to go with, and I think it would be a great option for Kyle Busch to go with heading into 2023. I do hope we see Kyle Busch race. I don't think it's out of him. He's completely out of the running of racing in the Indy 500, but it's seeming less and less likely that he's going to run it, and it would be a shame if he can't run it because I think he could actually win the Indianapolis 500 or at least get a really good finish in the Indy 500 for that matter. So I do hope that Kyle Busch does race in the Indy 500 in 2023. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I think there's a chance he could, but we're not sure if it will. We'll definitely have to wait and see what happens if he does race in the 2023 Indianapolis 500. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch. Now, Denny Hamlin was speaking to the media, and Denny Hamlin says that 2311 Racing is expecting an update on Kurt Busch sometime this upcoming week on his condition if Kurt will return for 2022 or if he will not return for 2022 and if he will be back in 2023 or not at this point. Now, why is Denny Hamlin wanting an update, and why is 2311 really, and why is this really, really important for fans? Well, this is going to determine if Kurt Busch is going to be coming back for 2023 or not. And the reason being is because Kurt Busch, he does want to return to 2311 Racing at some point this year. Now, there are still only 4 races left to go, so if Kurt was smart, he could sit out for the rest of the year. I personally think Kurt might sit out for the rest of the year, but I don't know if he is going to sit out for the rest of the year. That's the thing. I still think Kurt really has that itch and still wants to come back and race in 2023. But if I was smart for Kurt, or 22 I should say, if Kurt was smart, though, well, which I think he is, I think if Kurt really wanted to, I think he would sit out for the rest of the year. I think he would because I think he needs to get his health and safety the #1 priority. It's good to see he's back at the racetrack, and I think coming back to the racetrack is very, very important for him to come back. But I think if I was Kurt, I'm not in Kurt Busch, but if I was in Kurt's shoes, I would basically sit out for the rest of the year. But Kurt wants to come back and race, and I don't blame him. I think, though, they're likely he'll come back next year, but we'll have to wait and see if they do decide to bring Kurt Busch back. But it's good to see that an update is coming in the not-so-distant future. In my opinion, I hope this update is really good on Kurt Busch's side, and hopefully it's a good sign and not a bad sign that Kurt could actually have an opportunity to return. I think it'd be really awesome if he does return, and I do hope that he does make a return to NASCAR at some point in 2022 and does get to return and do one final season with the team. But I'm worried that Kurt will not have the same performance as he had before the concussions. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cole Custer. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race, you saw a little bit of controversy where Cole Custer might have basically had some sort of issue or basically was braking to help Chase Briscoe. And NASCAR announced about an hour after the race that NASCAR is going to be reviewing the 41 data and audio to determine if Custer's role in helping Briscoe out. And if they're able to find any sufficient evidence that he was really brake checking the corner and not having some sort of mechanical issue, they're going to announce penalties for Cole Custer. Now, what are the options for NASCAR to do? First, don't do anything. And I can see him not really doing any sort of penalties. I think this is not likely, but this could be an option for NASCAR. Number 2, they could just fine Cole Custer like $10,000 or $20,000. I think this is the most likely option they're going to go with. I don't see them going to the extreme with this kind of stuff because they didn't penalize Eric Jones for this. They didn't penalize Chase Elliott for this last year. So I don't know if they're going to penalize him excessively, but they could go ahead and fine him. That could be a very small option. Number 3, they go ahead and basically suspend Cole Custer. I think this would be over extreme. I don't see them doing this. I think this would be over extreme in that case. And then the final one is add Kyle Larson to the playoffs and have a 9-car field for the playoffs. I think that would be stupid if they did that, but if NASCAR really was crazy, they would do crazy stuff like this. I've seen NASCAR do some crazy stuff these last couple years, and in my opinion, I think it'd be really, really stupid if they were to go ahead and do that. So personally, what I think they are going to do is I think that they are going to give him a fine for this because I think it was ridiculous if they did help him out. But we've seen drivers do this in the past. It's nothing new, and I'm not sure if they're going to penalize him to the extreme. That being said, if they do decide to go ahead and penalize him, it is what it is, and we'll see if they do send sort of penalties and message out to Cole Custer, but we'll see if SHR does appeal the fine, because I think they could appeal. They basically said, oh, he had an issue on the car. Cole said he did have an issue on the car, but we'll have to see if NASCAR believes that Indy do decide to go ahead and give him some sort of penalty. We'll have to definitely wait and see for sure, and we'll see if NASCAR does go ahead and penalize him, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, Kyle Larson was being interviewed by the media about Indy 500 run for 2023. And Kyle Larson says he has been given the green light and is still interested in doing the Indianapolis 500. But he did say that he was not able to do it in 2022, and Rick Hendrick basically told him that he would not do the Indy 500. Now, why was Kyle Larson not given the green light to do the 2022 Indianapolis 500? I think it's very, very simple. I think a lot of it was for Kyle Larson to do a lot of testing with the next-gen car and focus on doing the next-gen car stuff as well. I know that Larson was in conversations, probably run the Rolex 24 in 2022, but everyone was so focused on racing and getting the car ready to go that no one really could do a lot of those special events this year. Even the Chili Bowl, some drivers are questioned on if they're going to run the Chili Bowl or not, because he did have testing going on for the next-gen car during the Chili Bowl weekend. But Kyle Larson, Indy 500. This has been one of the biggest conversations and talking points for sure, really over the last couple weeks. And it's because really you have a lot of drivers who are interested. You've got 2 Cup drivers who are interested, that being Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson. And you've got a guy like Jimmy Johnson who's interested in doing the double, which all 3 drivers are interested in doing the NASCAR IndyCar double during Memorial Day weekend. I think it'd be awesome if they were all able to do double. Now, let's go back to talk about Kyle Larson. Where could Kyle Larson race if he was to race in the 2023 Indy 500? Well, I think Team Penske is an option. I think Team Penske would be a really good option. But again, they've said that they don't want a 4th car. McLaren could be an option, but Tony Kanaan is basically in the running for that. I could see Larson doing a different manufacturer and going to Chip Ganassi Racing. And I think Chip Ganassi would probably be the favorite. And I'll explain why Chip Ganassi Racing. Chip Ganassi Racing, while they are a different manufacturer, Kyle Larson was up on the pit box with Chip Ganassi during the IndyCar race at Indianapolis, during when NASCAR and IndyCar were having their same weekend. Kyle Larson was sitting on the pit box. Could Kyle Larson be discussing about running Indy 500? It's very, very possible. I think Larson, if he goes and runs Indy 500 in 2023, I think it's going to be with Ganassi. And we know how fast Ganassi is. Chip Ganassi Racing has won the Indianapolis 500 last year with Marcus Ericsson, and they've won the Indy 500 many, many times with Scott Dixon, Dario Franchitti, you name it, they've won the Indy 500 many, many times. And I don't see a problem with Kyle Larson getting in there, because I think Larson actually would truly win the Indy 500. I think he'd be able to get it done, and I think he would be really, really fast at Indy 500. So we'll have to wait and see if Larson does truly run the Indy 500, but I think there's a really good chance and a really big possibility that Kyle Larson could actually run in the Indy 500 2023. We'll definitely have to wait and see what happens for sure, but it sounds like Larson is definitely in the running to run the Indy 500 in 2023. We'll have to wait and see what happens if he actually does so. We'll go ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're going to talk about NASCAR versus the teams when it comes to the next media rights deal. Now, for those of you who have not been really paying attention, there's a new media deal that is going to be coming in the next few years, a new contract that is going to be set for 2025, and this deal is supposed to be done sometime next year. Now, things have been not going so well when it comes to the negotiations, when it comes to the next TV deal. On Friday, the first tweet that really came out was from Adam Cerny. He says that Jeff Gordon says that NASCAR and the teams are far apart in their talks on the financial split of the sport in the media deal. On the RTA, there are 5 big officials on that board. Jeff Gordon, Curtis Polk is another one who's a co-owner of 2311 Racing. Dave Alpine, who's the president of Joe Gibbs Racing, and 2 other individuals are on that group. They basically are saying that the deal is not going very, very well. And then the Race Team Alliance also in that tweet, he reports, sent in a proposal, and the answer was not to their liking from NASCAR. What the RTA is wanting for the teams and the drivers is they're wanting more money when it comes to the next TV deal. What NASCAR is saying is that what they want the teams to do is they're going to try to increase the revenue for the teams, but what they're wanting is the teams to cut costs in their organizations. Now, what does it mean when you're cutting costs? What that means is that you're cutting jobs out of the team so that you can get more revenue, but you're cutting jobs. This is not a really good business practice, in my opinion. I'm going to explain why. When you're cutting jobs, well, you're losing money in the long run. And we've already seen a lot of jobs cut with this next-gen car. We've seen a lot of engineers that people work on bodies have had to get their jobs cut because of the next-gen car. If NASCAR sending single-source parts, basically, they've had to cut a lot of jobs. Now, NASCAR did release a statement basically saying that they are going to attempt to work with the teams and try to get teams and have a deal so everything works out very, very well for the organizations. Then later, a little bit later in the time, let's talk about the split they're getting. According to Curtis Polk, the teams feel like that they're getting a 93-7 split, with NASCAR and the tracks getting a 93% split, and then the teams getting a 7% split. Now, NASCAR responded to that by saying that they feel like those numbers are way, way off, and they feel like that they are in the wrong. Now, maybe when it comes to 93-7 split, the teams might be a little bit biased on that, but if that is true, then of course the teams are not getting enough money, and of course the teams are going to be really, really upset about that. They're going to want more money. Obviously, when you're only getting 7% of the TV revenue, that, of course, is going to hurt teams. That's not enough money the teams are getting. I understand that, of course, there's a 65, 25, and 10 deal, but still, it's ridiculous to me the fact that basically it's ridiculous to me the fact they've only got a certain amount of money coming in for the teams. 7% of the TV money is only coming in for the teams. That's not enough money from them. And you think about Sammy Truck Series, they get barely any of the TV deal as well. Way worse than that. 7% of the money. How are teams supposed to survive? We're not in 2010 or 2011 or even 2005 for that matter, where teams were able to make enough money, or even 2012 and 2013 when you had sponsors staying on the long term in full season sponsors. We're not 10 years ago. We're 2022. When you have companies like M&M's jumping ship, you've got to give these teams a lot more of the upcoming TV revenue. That's what the teams are wanting. They're wanting more of the TV revenue. If they're not getting that kind of money, they're going to go there. So what happens at this point? Well, obviously, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think we're in the dark days yet. I still think this is not good that we're getting this kind of stuff public. This has not happened in a long time where this kind of stuff really goes public. I don't know what's going to happen. Could there be a strike? Could there be basically where we have a split? I don't think we're going to get that far. I do think personally a deal is going to get done. I think we're still in the early negotiations phase, but I think what needs to happen is the teams need to get a bigger piece of the pie. That's the easiest solution, in my opinion, is giving the teams a bigger piece of the pie. I think that they need to get more money on this next TV deal, especially when there's talk that this is going to be the most expensive deal that we've ever had in NASCAR history when it comes to the TV deals. There needs to be something done. There needs to be better structure, and hopefully NASCAR is working on a solution to help the teams. I think they will get a solution figured out. I think they will. But man, the fact that this has gotten to this point where we're seeing this kind of stuff go public, it's never a good thing for this kind of stuff to go public. And I think the teams deserve a bigger piece of that pie. They really deserve to get a bigger piece of that pie. And it hasn't been really good the last couple weeks for NASCAR. That's all I'm going to say. But personally, hope the teams do get a bigger piece of that pie. And I really hope that there's a good chance that they can get a bigger piece because they deserve a bigger piece, in my opinion. And hopefully we do see them get a bigger, in my opinion, I really hope there's a good chance that you get a bigger piece of that pie because they deserve a bigger piece of that pie. Hopefully they're able to get a little more money in the upcoming next TV deal, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about NASCAR and their next-gen safety meeting. Now, on Saturday, before practice and qualifying began for the Cup Series, all of the drivers who are competing in the Cup Series full-time in 2022 had a meeting with NASCAR. The meeting was 75 minutes long, so it was a very, very long meeting, and apparently the meeting was very, very intense, and the drivers spoke out about safety meeting. NASCAR said this meeting had been planned due to the safety of the next-gen car, due to multiple drivers sitting out, Cody Werbasio, who's sitting out due to a leg injury, and Kurt Busch and Alex Bowman sitting out due to concussion issues, and drivers have been really going outspoken saying that the rear of the car needs to be fixed. First, Brad Sussey spoke to the meeting and says the meeting was cordial but intense, positive step, but says changes will be expensive. Now, there was a crash test that basically happened on Wednesday, and according to reports, crash test went well, and changes to the rear of the car will be implemented for 2023. Changes to the rear clip are going to be implemented for 2023, which I think is a very positive to hear. Now, there was certainly a 20-slide presentation that went out from these next-gen meetings and basically showed everything in plans from the crash test and also what the issues were for the car. Multiple drivers basically said that basically there were a couple that were really more outspoken than others. I think mainly Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin were most outspoken in these meetings. Chris Abel said during those meetings, he says the meetings were very, very intense and felt that the meetings were going pretty well, but he felt the meetings were really, really intense. Joey Logano, after winning the Cup Series pole and was speaking meeting, he says that the meetings should have happened for a long time. Now, Steve Phelps spoke to the media basically on the NBC Sports Box and says that the meetings, says there are going to be weekly meetings for 2023 and says his fault for not having it when Kurt Busch's incident happened, which he's taking responsibility, which I think is very, very positive. I agree with Logano. These meetings should have happened for a very, very long time. Denny Hamlin basically spoke to media and basically said he already had said what he needed to say. Said it was definitely very, very informative with the meeting, but he said that it was definitely really, really intense as well. Finally, Kyle Larson was there as well, and he basically kind of said something that's a little bit interesting. He says that the data is better, but it is still worse than the last car. Basically said the data was a lot better with the rears of the car, but still said it was way, way worse. Let's talk about these next-gen safety meetings here for just a second when it comes to this. This safety meeting should have, I agree with Joey Logano and Steve Phelps, this meeting should have happened with Kurt Busch. The fact we waited this long to have this meeting is definitely really, really frustrating. But drivers felt like the meeting went really, really well, which I think is really, really good. And it's good to see that there are changes coming to the next-gen car for NASCAR. I think it's good that there are changes coming because these changes are going to be really, really important. What are these changes? Well, the plans is there's probably going to be a little more crush zones in the back of the car and differences in the rear clipping, where if you hit the back of the wall, the energy is not going to the back of your head and causing concussion-like symptoms. We cannot have drivers having concussion-like symptoms similar to Alex Bowman and Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch is a little bit older, but Alex Bowman, I think, is only 28 or 29 years old. He really is not that old of a driver. And concussion-like symptoms can really affect your career. And Alex Bowman has set out 2 races. He could come back this week, but he could probably not come back. And Kurt Busch, we still don't know what's going on with Kurt Busch for 2023. We're still waiting on an update for when Kurt Busch is going to come back. But I love the direction we're heading, and it's good to have these safety meetings. And again, one thing that I think is a major positive is these safety meetings are going to happen for the rest of the year. So for the next 4 or 5 weeks, or even probably some weeks after the offseason, you're probably going to have safety meetings with this car. This has to be, though, the #1 priority, and I think NASCAR is taking this very seriously. And I don't think NASCAR doesn't care. I think they do care about the driver's safety. Don't get me wrong, money is really probably important to NASCAR, but the driver safety to me is way more important than basically how much money they're getting in the next TV deal. We got to get the safety car worked on, and it's good to see that NASCAR did have these safety meetings. And I'm really happy that we're kind of heading toward this direction because I think it's really important. NASCAR does clearly head toward this direction. There needs to be changes to this next-gen car, and it needs to be taken very, very seriously. So it is, don't get me wrong, it is good to see that these meetings are going down. It needs to happen every single week, and there'll probably be more testing going forward. There's probably going to be some upcoming testing during the offseason. I don't think these drivers are going to be not having much going on. So the next few months in the offseason is definitely going to be really insane when it comes to silly season, all that kind of stuff. It's good to see that these next-gen safety meetings are happening. They needed to happen for a very, very long time. And I think it's good to see that we're kind of heading toward a little bit of a better direction when it comes. Safety to me is the #1 priority, and it's good to see that these meetings are going down, and it's better for the sport that we are having these safety meetings. So it's really good to see for sure. I'm glad to see we're kind of heading toward a more positive direction, and hopefully with these upcoming changes, we can see it fixed. NASCAR is definitely in a tough box, no doubt about that, but if we can get the safety better, we're not having concussion-like symptoms, and we can get more crush zones, and the car kind of gives a little more, I think it's going to be better. So it's good to see for sure, and glad to see that we're kind of headed toward a little bit more of a positive direction, but there's still stuff to do. So that is it for today's Law NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Turn notifications on so you be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links in the description below for that. And comment below your thoughts on today's video. What are thoughts about the next-gen safety meetings and NASCAR implementing some new changes to the rear of the car for 2023? Let me know in the comments below. And what are thoughts about the NASCAR teams having issues in the negotiation process for the next TV deal? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're going to have a race picks video for Las Vegas as we do begin the round of 8 for the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. Then Wednesday, we'll probably have another NASCAR news video. Thursday, we'll probably have a special video dropping. It could be an update video, but I'm not sure yet. There might be something special coming out Thursday. Friday, more than likely NASCAR news video. And then Saturday and Sunday, we will have the Xfinity and Cup reviews for Las Vegas as well, because we don't have any other racing other than that. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.